So we are here with another episode of our podcast, usually in Czech language today, of course, for the first time in English. So a little bit stressful for both of us today with the guest, Trap, coach of Dynamo Eclot. Hi, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty good.
Great, great, me too. So we can start us off. I think I would. Today we will talk about EU Masters, finishing of the playoffs, but of course the topic I would like to start with is Dynamo Eclot, the team you are coaching. How did you even get into the team? Because of course not many coaches or even players play in the Czech league. So how did you get this opportunity? How did it all happen? Just to start
Uh,
us off.
Basically, I had a lot of tryouts this off season, and whenever I go into an off season, my goal is already to basically say, okay, I want to be where I can make a difference. I feel like my career has always been that I worked on lower tier teams and made them get better results, basically. So I looked at where my options were, and Dynamic looked very promising due to the strength of the Czech league in general, and with the budget we had available. So I went in and I did a tryout, and basically after the first tryout, they said, "Okay, we want you," and that was very early on. So I was still doing some other trials at the time, but after completing my other trials, I just thought like it was a good fit, and I had full roster control, right? So that's how I ended up here, basically. Um, I don't really think about that much about what league I'm in. I just really look at, okay, like can I make something with this team and can I actually make it work? That's mostly what I look at.
All right, so you were saying that you had the full roster control. So I obviously heard that some of the players you were even coaching before. So which were like the players you already knew? Which were maybe some players that you did not know? Probably the Czech players, I would assume. But yeah.
uh, I worked with Rifty before. I worked with Fallen before. And I worked with Bendix before. I basically looked at Riftu. Actually, he was one of the guys I was looking to pick up even last season because I scouted him from academy, or I think he played in academy last. But he's a guy I've been looking at for a while. I generally like to scout players a lot because I think if you find talented players and you get to work with them early on, it's really good. So even last split, I had a look at Riftu because he looked really promising in the spring in the split he played. But yeah, I knew basically Rifty and Fallen and Bendix from before. Bendix from my split in Greek League where we ended third. Fallen back from like 2019 when I coached him, and then Rifty back from I think it was 2020 summer where I coached him on a UK team. So I basically knew them all before. Most knew them all beforehand. Susak just came in on trials and he had a very good energy, right? So it's important to pick up the giant.
Yeah. Zuzak, of course, like subbing in the last split as well. So obviously you needed some Czech players, and I think Zuzak for a long time is one of the best supports in here. So not that difficult of a choice, I would say. Uh, so maybe we were talking about some players. Can I ask you? I don't know how much you can reveal, but Rifty was not playing for some weeks and was came back for the playoffs. So can you maybe give us some more information? What happened there? What was the problem? Why didn't he play?
So Rifty has health problems basically. He's dealt with them for most of his life, right? So there was a period where he got stressed due to some circumstances that happened within the team. So he generally just had health issues, right? And we had to give him a break. So that was just generally why he didn't play. It wasn't really anything else over that. And then we had our substitute Usul come in, and he did great as well, right? Of course, it would always been better to have Rifty because he wasn't really screaming at that time as well. But I think it's very important to give players the time they need to kind of recover. Because going into our last playoffs games as well, we had two players who were sick, right? And I think that kind of showed in how we played as well. So he was sick for the 2 weeks now. It's basically just what happened. But the reason he was sick probably isn't something I can reveal too much about.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, no
Yeah.
problem. Just there were a lot of speculation. Some people were saying that
Yeah.
he maybe didn't fit the team or like he was toxic or always these rumors
Yeah,
happen. So I would just like to clarify. I think that's good. And of course,
Rifty's a lovely lad. Like he's really chill. Like he sounds like an old man, but he's very fun. He's a bit of a 1v9 player as well, but yeah, I don't Rifty's never toxic or anything. He's just very pretty chill. Like
I think it's just if you are picking Yasuo to play, the people will start making rumors.
I
So
mean, you would not know how many times in Scrim he's asked for Vayne top into Mundo or something like that. Like it's happened so many times.
I've
Like
coached a bunch of these players as well. Like Omon from last split I was coaching, he was always like mastery mid lane and the Draven mid lane and stuff like this all
yeah.
the time. So yeah, just some players are a bit crazy, yeah,
I
but
mean,
in a
we
good
went.
way.
Yeah, I mean, we went the extra bit with Rift because the problem is that the teams we were scrimming in scrims, like Rift would just go up and kill enemy top lane like 5 times in a row, solo if he got a good matchup. So we came to a point where we were just kind of like picking bad matchups for him, and he'd still solo kill. So at one point it was just like, "Can we pick Vayne top?" And I'm like, "Do you really want it?" And they said, "Nah." And then we picked like I think it was Silent and Mundo instead, just to limit us the matchup. And Rifty after the game like, "Yeah, let's not do that again." So yeah.
Yeah,
So
I wanted
yeah,
to touch back on what you said that Rift had some issues, and I mean, generally over time we saw, or recently especially, we see a lot more people kind of get some health issues or maybe are forced to take a break. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to reiterate that you said people need to some time to recover maybe from all the stress and stuff like that. And I think certainly with Rifty it helped a ton because at the start of the split he still looked very talented, but perhaps did not show the same kind of capability as he did when he came back. And I think he looked like maybe the best top laner in playoffs. So I certainly hope that more teams are willing to take this approach and maybe give some of their players the time off it if they need it.
Yeah, I think the most important thing probably when you go into a split and you look at your roster, right? I think it's pacing basically. You want to make sure that everybody's in top state, like in the best state they can do when you go for playoffs. So just to reel a bit on like how we structure scrimmings, that we started out like pretty light, doing like 3 times a week, and then we wanted to go to like 4 times mid split to just gear up a bit, and then like basically in playoffs we'd be okay, and now we do 5 times a week and we play, and then we do like the boss meta 5, right? I think when you do it like that, you don't really give the players an opportunity to burn out. I think that's probably the biggest issue is that people can tend to burn out when they play so many scrims and so many games. There are of course other health issues that can happen, right? But I think it's just important that if you want to win, you have to take care of your players' health being as well, right? Because at the end of the day, the more comfortable they feel and the better they feel once they go into the game, the better they're gonna perform.
Yeah,
yeah. So
certainly.
you kind of the pacing, you know, you crap to today's topic. So I would like to ask you because I would say that at the start of the split, of course, you had some losses. Didn't look too great. You had, you know, from the play as well, wasn't that much impressive. But if we reel back into like more recently in the end towards the end of the playoffs, you were looking like you could beat the Sinners, you could beat maybe Isuba as well. So was this like the plan as you are saying, or what do you think that you had some problems at the start of the split? Of course, like Zeusak was mentioned that maybe you got cancelled bunch of scrims as well. Maybe that
Yes.
didn't help. So yeah,
Uh,
again, your
I,
thoughts?
I think so. So the way I like to structure it, right, is that I look at So I look at the team as how it functions at the start, basically from scratch. I say, okay, there's some issues we have to fix now because those are the basically major ones, right? It can be bad setup. It can be just in general like how people function together in a team, and you fix those issues at the start. Then you start like basically a longer process, and it's kind of like learning a language, I'd say, right? If you only know a few words in a language, you can't communicate in it. And then whenever you talk to somebody who's native in the language, you're gonna get slapped around because you don't understand what they're saying. But once you actually learn the language, you can start basically engaging with them and actually like talking to them. That's what I feel like the process was for us, is that we had a lot of scattered pieces that just need to be put together. I think what happened later on though is that people just kind of found out our number one weakness, and that is the fact that we like to fight. And that's kind of been like an overarching theme. Probably you could guess that with the B1 with the Yasuo pick as well. It's like the team was pretty good at fighting. So we would sometimes just skip setups on objectives and stuff like that, and that was something we kind of worked on throughout the entire split. Um, but at the end of the day, it's like it's just making sure that we can start off as bad as we want to, right? But we always want to make sure we reach a goal where we're playing at a higher level because we basically took our time and did things in the right order. So I think that's just the most important thing. I think what I saw a lot this split was that people were kind of neglecting basics like fundamentals in the game, especially some of the lower tier teams. There was a lot of just like not losing priority correctly. There was a lot of just generally like not shoving waves, crashing and resetting. So I think overall that's how you should think about it. Just think, okay, it doesn't matter where we are now; it's where we're gonna end up, right? I think that's a very good holistic picture to have, because if you know where you're gonna end up, you always have like a control over everything to some degree.
I would like to also talk about some drafts because
Oh
again
no!
towards the start no, towards the start of the split again, I think we were picking some like melee mid laners and stuff like that, where even if you look at the solo queue accounts of not
Bendix.
Rifty, of Bendix, you can see that he likes like Syndra, Orianna, Azir, these like mage mid laners basically. So was it also like a conscious decision that maybe these melee mid laners, even though some teams are playing them, that's not the best for us? So you started picking more of like the Corkis and the Syndras, the Oriannas. Maybe help the meta shifting towards the Syndra at the towards the end of the playoffs help you a bit as well.
I think the way I basically looked at this, right, because I think having worked with Bennings last split, basically he played like mostly Karma, Rise, and I think it was a bit of Syndra games and Victor games basically. But like I think Bennings probably has the best Lee Sin in the league. Like looking at the game, like at the actual games he's played with it. The problem is that playing like mage versus melee is a very different playstyle in terms of how you use priority, right? And we kind of knew like going into later stages of the split that we needed a different form of priority, because we could have kept picking like Lee Sin, Renekton, I mean basically all the other melee mids. Like we practiced them in scrims because they were important to have just in case they were useful for draft. So we basically said, okay, we can have this sort of priority mid that can like skirmish and fight and whatever, but actually we were a team where we said, okay, if we cannot do anything for like the early game and just not int, we're gonna win to some degree. So especially having Bennings on like a champion that he could stall out the game, he could be a bit more impactful like later on in team fights. That helped us a lot, right? Because Bennings, like once you can see his Ezreal games and like his mage games, like once he gets going, it's really 1v9. But if I give him a champion like Viego or Lee Sin, where he has to snowball early game, suddenly the entire team goes bananas and we have to fight everything. So it was more I think it's like a team decision, where the point is just more that it didn't matter that Phoenix played them. It was just more that when we played them, the team would basically go a bit nuts because they said we can fight, instead of saying, guys, let's just push this wave and just wait for next to be FT. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that a lot of the times it's not that mechanically the player cannot play the champion, but maybe team-wise or even individual-wise, the playstyle is just not great. As you are saying, maybe if you have some early game snowbally pick, the players can feel the pressure to that they need to do something, that they need to force something, and if it's 20 minutes 0-0, they are starting to sweat, you know, play worse, force stupid fights and stuff like that. So agree that I mean, I like the draft, and I would agree with you that you had maybe a little bit more passive early game, but always finding out those macro plays. And I think all of your players are like a bit older than maybe the average of the league, and that I think shows that the experience also shows. Even someone as like a Riftu is a bit older, even though he is like on the big stage kind of for the first time, but he's been playing in the Czech leagues for a bunch and already has a lot of experience. So I think that was a good decision, and I would agree with that. I think, or if you have Mark some questions, you can ask as well. But I think we can transition into the playoffs. Maybe talk about the
Sure.
series we did not talk about yet, and yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So let's go to Inside Games versus Dynamo Eclot. Dynamo Eclot. I don't know if I should say it in Czech language or in English.
Just however you want.
I think it doesn't matter much. So, what were the expectations coming into the series? Of course, Inside Games were playing really well, I would say, in the regular split, but then had the unfortunate jungle situation. So, were you expecting to 3-0, or what were you guys thinking going into the series?
I think from a coach perspective, I think like saying 3-0 is always pretty bad, because like you're always gonna do like 2 games windows, and then enemy team gets to adjust to you, and then they win the one, and then you adjust back, right? But I think everybody was probably pretty cocky going in. Like everybody was like ready for 3-0, right? I think we even joked about let's go 3-0 so we can watch, like, I think it was like LCS or LCK on Sunday. So like people were pretty hyped going in. I think the biggest problem probably for Inside was the fact that despite the issues with their younger from beforehand, he was like he was very chaotic in the games. That was one of the issues we'd had when going against him, is that we had tried to read his pathing, but there wasn't really like a pattern to his pathing, which can be good and great at the same time, right? Like if he doesn't get to do anything with the pathing, he falls massively behind. But we just weren't good at not dying to ganks. Let's put it like that. So getting Savro in was a lot easier for us to deal with, just because he played a lot more. He played a lot more like by the book, I'd say. And our players could actually read his pathing. Also, we prepared basically saying, okay, we want certain priorities in the draft. We want priority here and there. I think looking at inside, I think they were mostly carrying through top lane to some degree. I think their bot lane probably could carry, but they were always in the games we watched. They were basically always going even or like falling behind slightly, because there was increased jungle pressure. So we just kind of knew, like, if we can pick something on top lane, then make sure that Rifty doesn't perma die, it'll be fine, because like we were just passively getting ahead in the other lanes, right? I think inside though was a really hard opponent, because they are the team we hate the most to play against in terms of like our playstyle, because we are very slow. Like we take it slow. We don't do that many aggressive plays. We wait for like objective timers for item spikes, and inside just explode the game like by minute 3. And I think you could even see that against the first game against us. Like I think all of the games were actually pretty close. Like I think there were a few mistakes that defined the series, but even at the first game, I think they were ahead by like 6 kills or something early on, and we were just sitting there like, okay, guys, let's calm down a bit. But yeah, I think the most important thing is that everybody was just calm, and we played for Drake's, right? Because that was how we ended our first game. We played around objectives because we knew that they're gonna run out of steam at some point, because they played pretty early game picks. So a very tough series, but good regardless, because we stuck to our basics.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you what you are saying, that inside games, like as at least the support, you know, level 2, and basically he's sitting top lane now. So that's pretty hard, or can be pretty hard to play around or play against. So as well as I think both of your teams were kind of similar in the sense that you also, I think, played towards top lane a bunch, or at least more than maybe Sinners and Isuba did. So I think that's also like, you know, if you are clashing the styles, it's always can be harder, or you know, you
It
can
can
do
be
one
very
mistake and
explosive as
suddenly
well.
the game is wide open. So agree. I mean, I was also thinking maybe 3-0, 3-1 for you guys, because I thought that you guys played really well against Isuba, as well as inside games kind of not performing, having the jungle issues, and overall I thought that the inside games did not have that big of a talent in the roster as you guys did. I think that they had Keo, and if Keo did not perform exceptionally well, then they would struggle, I thought. So that's just my thoughts, and I think we can move towards maybe a bit more interesting, at least for me, series against Sinners, because again, if I would start in the start of the playoffs, I would say Sinners beat you pretty easily, handedly. But again, the series against Isuba and against Inside Games, I thought you guys showed a lot, and you guys played pretty decently. So I thought you would give Sinners a run for their money, definitely. And I mean, you guys did. I think you could have won if like 1, 2 things happened differently. So again, what were the thoughts coming into the series? And yeah, you can start us off.
So I think going into the series, we knew they were going to be a hard opponent, right? Because we had a 1-1 record against them in the regular split, and we just thought, okay, they are a team who's gone to your Masters multiple times. Like it's basically I think like last split and the split before, they're basically the team who went to your Masters with the super, right? So we knew they weren't going to be easy to beat. But we had the fortune of not having showed our Syndra bot lane pick yet, and that was kind of what we were hinging on, this because people knew that Riftu played 6 bot lane, but Syndra bot lane was kind of hidden, and we got it like 1 game and it opened up the series pretty fast. But I think the thoughts going into that, we had 2 sick players going into that series, so basically we knew on the team that it's either like 3-0 or 3-1, or it's probably going to be like really hard to win the game. So we came in with like a fresh mindset, like want to win, of course, but we also knew that like we had to play really good the first 3 games. I think the first 2 games we played really good. Like we just kind of basically outplayed them. I think we had better map movement. I think we had better lane. We played better in lanes, and I also think the drafts were a bit better. Then the coach shift kind of happened. Game 3 is what I'd say. I kind of sprinted down draft as hard as possible, and I think that kind of killed the team's momentum to some degree. So yeah, that was like a mistake in the draft. But then game 4 we had the unfortunate thing with Sensao and Ricehold happen, and even like because the game was so long, I could hear like the players they're really close, like burning out. Especially the ones who were sick, right? Like we had issue. The ones who were sick just really like you could hear on them that this was getting tough on them. So I think the series as a whole, like we just went in and thought, okay, we just need we need priority mid if we can. We need a bot lane that can just lane for free, and then we pick whatever top lane that Rifty wants, and Rifty will win the game. So Rifty's like in terms of like how I managed like to look at the series is that we knew that the top lane matchup was probably one of the better ones for us. I don't think Garb is a bad top laner, but I think he's like very much of a weak side top laner. And that is the kind of top laners that Rifty just rips apart if he gets the chance to do so, because we just put resources into top lane, we dive, and then Rifty gets ahead and the game explodes. We knew they were very likely going to basically play towards bot lane, which is why we ended up picking mages, so we picked like Syndra, pick matchups that can basically just stay in the lane and not really die too much. Because that's how Sinners have mostly won their games. They put all the resources into Pyok and then made him like 1v9. So we tried that approach the first 2 games and it worked quite nicely. Then for third game, as I said, I messed up draft, and then fourth game, right, I think it was just players were getting stressed a bit because a comment was made by somebody that guys, let's not get reverse swept right now, and I think that's like without without like going too much down it, that's probably the worst thing you can say in a BO5, right? Because then the focus after that is that okay, everybody's focusing, let's not get reverse swept instead of actually trying to win the game.
Yeah.
So you can kind of feel that on the team. Like after that was said, it was just like, okay, let's just try to fix this. But I think overall, Sinners were just playing better, right? Like they had the mental to come back after the 0-2, and they just, I think honestly, like we should just abandon Syndra in like the later drafts. But I think we, as a team, kind of decided that Syndra wasn't the problem. But I think if we remove Syndra in like the later stage of the draft, I think their plan kind of fell apart because the issue ended up being that they had mid prio. And with the mid prio, they had like super aggressive jungle moves. If we just remove that mid prio, like it doesn't matter about the game because then we can just like take it slow. So I think that was the major mistakes, right? I think the right team won that day, right? Despite of us having sick players to fight, like a comment being made and whatnot, like Sinners having that tenacity to win a series when they're 2-0 down is insane. There's not a lot of teams that can do that. So despite how it ended, I think the right team won, and I think I'm proud of the players regardless, right? We could definitely have maybe gone to your masters, but I feel like it's better to have tried your best and have failed than not to have tried it all right.
I mean, I agree. Like, you guys played well. It was looking like maybe 3-0 at the one point, but again, as you are saying, like maybe also like Sinners played with each other for a long time, or at least some of the players did. So I think that helped them a lot. You guys did this roster for the first time, basically. So I think that's what like won the series probably, or even as you are saying, they just had the nerves, and you guys maybe were stressing a bit. For some of your players, so first probably big series for them, maybe even in their lives, or at least in a while. So yeah, not easy place to be in at especially if we come back to like lands. These feelings are like 10 times more. So I hope
Yeah.
that happens soon as well. So agreed. I mean, I was rooting for you guys, but as well for Sinners, and I think they have a bunch of good players. So as you were saying, you would say probably like kind of bittersweet feelings, like satisfied, but maybe you could have done the one extra step and be on the EU Masters. Would you say?
Yeah, I feel like if we made like one extra step, or like we just maybe had like, because we had a lot of scrim guns this season, so every single season I make like a document where I said, okay, how many scrims do we actually get to play? And for this season, we got to play 32% of the scrims we booked. To put that into perspective, the lowest number I've ever had on a team is 75.
I mean, I don't even know how that is possible. Like, I mean, I was coaching in Aqualis. I don't know if you knew that this play,
Yeah.
but I mean, we had a bunch of cancels as well. I don't make this how do you say it? I don't mark
Spreadsheet.
every single scrim or don't have this statistic, but I don't think that's nowhere near like that low numbers. I would say
Yeah.
if the 70% sounds about right, I would say so.
Yeah. And it was like insanely low, so I actually kind of investigated a bit and I actually like looked around, and there were some teams actually teams who got into your masters who had like a 50% play rate or like 55 as well. So like there was some teams having insanely low play rates just because they could cancel like last minute or just weren't able to find scrims with the roster, right? I think the biggest issue probably for this split with scrims has been that a lot of teams have only looked at like LP. Rifty is like always D1. Like he was 1k LP last season, and then he just decays to D1. He was 600 LP this season, then he just decayed to D1. That's kind of what Rifty does, right? And the rest of our roster weren't that high LP as well. I think only Fallen and Reach were like 700, and then Bennings and Susak were like 300, right? So like even some of the like Div 2 teams we were trying to book like just didn't want to book us because we were that low, because like low LP, right? Which is really weird, which was weird to me. But we had like a very low scrim percentage, and I think if we just had to like if we got to play even a few, I think it would have been very good. I think into Sinners we actually only got to play one scrim because we got cancelled one day before.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, I mean, scrims are always kind of an invitation only club where you kind of oftentimes have to hope that some good team gives you a chance, and then you perhaps play very well in the scrim against them, and then from there you can somehow get scrims from other good teams. But what you are saying about the LP, I've heard that somewhere else as well, that like just recently in EU especially, people started to look at LP a lot more. Like before, as long as you were like master, people did not really care at all, and they were just looking at how you play. But now it's weirdly just skewed towards LP. I think even when we had some players from the Czech league, a lot of them also just look to LP, or if you are like grandmaster or challenger, instead of how the players actually play. So do you think, have you noticed this kind of shift maybe in the past year, or yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I think without going too harsh, I think it's just the fact that you have a lot of people peaking right now for the first time ever, and you have a lot of orcs picking up rookies who are like 800, 700 LP, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the people booking scrims saying, okay, my team is 700 LP, and that LP equates to skill, but it just doesn't in competitive. And I think that's basically what happened. It's very like surface level, is that people are just looking at LP instead of actual like players on the roster. And also some of the people booking scrims, or some of the players might be like super young and actually don't know the players, right? Because for example, Rifty, he's played since like 2016, I think it is, maybe even further back, right? So it's like if I go to an LFL team or I go to like a Prime League team or whatever, I say I have Rifty on top lane, he'll be like, oh yeah, sure, let's scrim, right? Because they know Rifty, he has very good reputation. But if I go to like a team that's maybe like in a lower league, and they have like a maybe like an 800 LP average roster, they'll be like, nah, like you guys are too low, right? So I think it's just that there has definitely been a shift. I think it's a very sad shift, right? Because it basically just means that even if you have good players, you might not be able to get good scrims because people are looking at purely at LP now, right? You can always have like if you have a roster with very known talent, you're always going to get good scrims. But I think in, for example, Czech Republic's case, which is something I heard a lot this season, is that they have a lot of like decent players, but the problem is that they aren't that known, right? The same goes for like Riftu, Susak. Like they're both like super good, but they aren't that known, so nobody really like. If you're link a roster where my top is D1, my jungler is like 700 LP, ADC 700 LP, but mid support is like 300, right? Like that looks super weird if they don't know who the players are. So there's definitely been a shift, and I think it's just like a sad shift, but hopefully hopefully it'll change back, because I want to scrim a bit more.
I mean, especially like this year, a bunch of like Czech players, the really good ones, went into like some foreign leagues. So I think we have a lot of new talents who are really good, like the Sayator, Sacrifice, and stuff like this. Riftu, as you were saying. So bunch of our really, I would say, as you were saying, known players went somewhere else, and now we have a lot of younger talent who, again, don't need to be recognized or couldn't be recognized because they are not playing for that long and people did not noticed them yet. So yeah, and as well, I think it's a bit of like an ego thing, you know. If you, as you were saying, if you are 700 LP, I won't scream 100 LP. Those are bad players, but that doesn't doesn't it's not
Yeah.
always the true. And as well as I think if you lose, you know, if you have team bunch of grandmasters and you lose against like a Diamond 1 team, then your ego probably, or like, you know, you are thinking they are super bad. And but if you lose against another grandmaster team, you are like, okay, they were just better, you know, they are good players. So I think that's a bit of this as well. That
Yeah, certainly
easier to
some.
lose against the players that you think are good or like have a high ranked accounts.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think we can move on to the last series of the split for the hit point. Isuba versus Sinners. What would you predict coming into this series? I mean, don't know if the question is even needed, but I will ask it anyway.
I think we basically predicted going into the series. Like, I think Sinners were good, right? But I think Sinners had very glaring issues going into the series. And I think we showed how to expose that game 1 and game 2. So I was basically thinking Super were gonna win because I think they were more of like a better put together team, right? Like they had better fundamentals. They seemed to like know a map play a bit more. So I think in my mind I was probably expecting like 3-1. So I think that was just generally like I think 3-1 was like my prediction. That's always what I predict instead of like a 3-0. But I thought like Super were gonna win just because it feels like they had better laners. Like Super's mid laners is actually just insane. Like he's probably like the best mid laner like in the split besides from Benix, I'd say. So it's like I'd put those two on like top 1, top 2. So like he looks super good. And I think that was one of the issues that like Ken came in split that the mid lane one was quite weak. There wasn't that many great mid laners. They were like stable mid laners, but none that like really stood out to me and were like gonna 1v9 the game. And I think Sayator really did that in a lot of cases. Um, so I was expecting like a 3-1, and that was just my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I was heavily favoriting Isuba. Of course, I thought that Sinners still have a chance because they have some strong players. But as you were saying, like Sator, especially last split, he was kind of the player who like could have a really all-star performance, but could also go like 0-3 in the lane and just do nothing for the rest of the game. And I think, especially towards the playoffs, he really picked up the pace. And I don't remember any bad games from him basically. In their first BO5 against Sinners, he was just dominating or no, and I would say almost like 1v9 the entire series. So yeah, Sayato definitely a big talent and someone who I will be watching closely for the next few splits for sure. So uh, Mark, continue. I lost my train of thought.
Well, I don't know how much more we want to talk about this series. I definitely thought Asuba would win pretty easily as well. I mean, yeah.
What I wanted to talk about. I would like to talk about the junglers because coming into the playoffs, we even did like a tier list for in this on this podcast, and we were ranking maybe Fallen quite a bit lower than I would rank him after the playoffs. Even though we were even like saying that we did see some like flashes of brilliance, you know, that he could be really good. But again, he had kind of some good performances, some I would say not as good performances. But in the playoffs, he was really good. Maybe the Olaf pick helped him a little, but even on some other picks, he was outpathing a lot of junglers. And compared to that, Sacrifice, who we ranked as like the best jungler, I think struggled quite a bit in the playoffs. And
Yep.
even when we look at EU Masters, I would say you, of course that's like a different level maybe of difficulty, but also I think compared to the rest of Isuba, he had the most problems. So what do you think about the jungler? Maybe why Sacrifice didn't do well? Maybe Fallen. Start with Fallen. I guess that's the best I would say. So what was the change for Fallen that he was playing suddenly so well in playoffs?
So I think the fact that we just like the team really like ended up shaving up together in playoffs, right? Like everybody was really on the same page and everybody was like good together. Also, Fallen has played tanks like since season 7, I believe, like high challenger tanks player. And then I basically said, Fallen, okay, we're gonna play Lucina and Viego. And then Fallen said, okay. And then we played Lieutenant Viego, and the man just kind of discovered he had hands. And I think that would like mostly like came down to it is that Fallen just kind of discovered that he could play differently, right? Like we played a lot of Viego, we played some Lisin games as well. That I think we actually didn't win any of the Lisin games, but I don't think they were his fault, right? And we played some Olaf as well. Like we played actually like junglers that weren't only low in resource because that's generally what Fallen is, right? That's why he had some hit and miss performances because the champions he were playing is like either I get a gank off early game and help my laner, or I get out farmed by the opponent. So sometimes a gank would be a bit too like overforced or like we just wouldn't wait for timers and that's why like it was a bit hit and miss. But I think like towards the end of the split it was just that he became like a really well-rounded player. He had carry performances, he could carry games, he could be a weak side jungler, not a weak side but low resource jungler. And I think that was like really great about him. Whereas if I have to contrast with Sacrifice, right, we had a meme basically where we said, okay, they won't put him on anything but Trundle or Volibear. And that's not saying that there's anything wrong with that, right? But I feel like it didn't feel like there were any like contrast in how he could play because it was either Trundle, Volibear, or like any other like low resource jungler, right? Like he wasn't never given any resources. And again, I think there was like a game where he passed from like red buff to top lane level 2 to gank, and it's like when you play tank junglers or like low resource junglers, right, there's only a certain amount of pathings you can take because that's just how the junglers work. They need to get level 3 and then they need to look for a gank, or they need to take like one more camp and look for another gank after the next wave. I think the biggest problem for him was probably just the fact that he seemed very uncreative in his pathing, right? Like when we played like tanks with Fallen or whatever, like he'd do like 3 camps to top, he'd do like the like full top side into top side, or he'd do like 3 camp spot and then like go gank top lane and skipping his like blue side, so he'd be there in an earlier timer but still be level 3. So I think it's just a sense of creativity, right? I think that was the biggest issue for him as a jungler, right? I think if I had to put him on a tier list, I'd probably say he was like probably like the 3rd best jungler in the league, maybe 4th. I don't think he's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that what you want from a jungler wasn't that present in him during this split, especially in my mind, right? I want my jungler to be creative. I want him to be focused on how to help his teammate or like how to get ahead himself, right? And it felt like Sacrifice was just missing some of those aspects. Whereas Fallen, in contrast, Fallen was just like, okay, guys, I'll pick Trundle this game and then I'll gank top lane 50 times, and if we win, we win.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree. Like definitely, as I was mentioning, the flashes of brilliance from Fallen. I think that was the creativity and the pathing, as you were mentioning. I agree with that. Like some of those gangs, like you know, it's hard to kind of find it out, but when you see it in the game, you are like, okay, this is actually super good, and I give a lot of props to the for Fallen for that. So agree, and again, Sacrifice definitely not a bad jungler. I think also very young still, like pretty much his first year where he is playing on a big team. So I wouldn't give him too much, I mean, I would give him another chance. Definitely, I think he has a lot of to learn, and as well as like the jungle, it is the role where experience matters a lot. I think, and yeah,
definitely.
fallen much older, or even like the Lians, and yeah, I wouldn't even put anyone else above Sacrifice. So I think just the experience the mattered here for the other junglers who performed a bit better in the playoffs. And yeah, so we can maybe transition towards the EU Masters.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you watched. I watched mainly the Czech leagues, but maybe we can talk about the group seedings, even though everyone talked about it a lot already on social medias. But you can just, I guess, mention. Of course, nobody. I think no one will disagree here that there needs to be a team pool similar to the main stage where you
Yeah.
divide the teams, because especially the Isuba group, that was pretty egregious to say at least. I would say the 3 teams from all major region, Vitality, Agorok, and Mouse Esports, I would expect them not only get out of the groups but probably even get to the main stage, so that all 3 are in the same group. And even Isuba, who might not be like the favorite to get out of to get into the main stage, but I think they would definitely give run for their money to some of these teams. So what is your point of view, or just yeah, again, I don't think we'll disagree much, but
I think probably the worst thing for me about this year Masters is that it kind of showed that they didn't really care too much about the groupings, right? Of course, there are coming some changes that's been announced to your else, like for next split, right? But I think the big problem is just that the groups are randomized, and I think that's a bit weird. Especially when you look at like, because I think you can always say, okay, it's hard to judge like how strong a team actually is, right? But you should at least not have a group where there's like you had like a group like Group C, right? I think it was, where there's like 3 major teams, and then like you have Isuba, right? And then you have Group A where there's like no major teams. You have Group, and it's like that, and Group D as well was also really weird, right? Like no major teams there. It's like you should just like kind of spread them out, right? Because that's also going to give the best to your Masters is that the best teams are going to come out. Like Vitality B was in a super tough group and ended up being 3-3. I would probably say if they had been in Group D, they would probably not have been 3-3. They would probably have been top of the group. So it feels really, really weird to me to see that they're grouping all of these like super strong and like investment heavy teams together. Because that's if there's no like seeding in the Masters, right? Like you could be like the best team in like second best team in your league, right? Go into play-ins, and then you're like against like the second best teams, like, and that might even be like more like worse than like what the final actually will be in like your Masters, right? I think that was super weird, right? I do overall think that the system has to be changed, and I hopefully that's coming from next split next year as far as we've heard. But it was definitely weird having those groups, and I think that Sinners got a really easy group compared to Zuba, definitely, which is why I think it's a bit weird, right? The first seed basically gets seeded into a group of death, and the second seed gets in like, oh yeah, we just gonna chill by and like play a few games. I think that was like very weird, right? Because like realistically, there should be a reward for you getting first place in your league, and I don't really think there was one for Zuba, except they just put into like literally oblivion.
I mean, yeah, that's I think the main issue is that like if you have kind of randomness, okay, that's I mean, again, I don't think that's fine, but I would understand. But as you are saying, if you win the league, you should have some reward, and of course you have some money. But towards the EU Masters, you are basically at the same playing field as Sinners, so that's just weird. And yeah, it's like recurring that I think almost every EU Masters, the first team from Czech Republic or like Czechoslovakian region has a worse group than the second. So just this year or like this split, it was so egregious that like this is probably the worst play in a group ever, I would say. Don't think there was any more ridiculous group than this. So unfortunate for Isuba, because I do think that they could have even like topped some of the groups if they were placed there instead of some other teams, but unfortunately it was not the case, and at least we are rooting for Sinners, who I think did some improvements in their play and were looking decently well, but
Yeah.
they have, I think, Mousy Sports as their
BL3 against Mouse. Like as much as I wanted to win, right? I just want to be realistic and say if you look at how Mouse play and look at the level of players they have, you're probably not gonna see them go through.
Yeah, probably not, but you know, in mouse sport there is like a Czech support at least, or Slovakian, I think, Camille.
Yeah.
But so that's at least some representation for our region. So I'm not too mad about that one.
Yeah, it's fine. Like I think the good like Czech Republic or Slovakian players, right? They're already on the good teams, right, and will probably get through. I mean, if Suba could probably make to main stage in a different group as well, right? So there's definitely like there's good stuff like sure. I just think that it's a bit unfortunate, especially since like Mouse look very strong again this EU Masters.
Mouse, I mean, I'm even a bit not confused, but I would expect them maybe even rank higher in their league, but that just shows how difficult these leagues are, like the LFL Prime League or even the Spanish League, that all the like top 4 probably even are really strong teams. So I will be rooting for our Czech representation, also like Dride and Newcam as well. They will be repeating their run, so I will be watching that. And overall, unfortunate for Isuba. That said, I liked a lot how they played. I liked how they showed up, that they did not give up, and especially like Dene and Welcome, but even like Sator were showing a lot of promise. And I just hope that this team does not fall apart. That we will see them at least one more go, maybe make like 1-2 roster changes. I think it's not even needed. They just need a little bit more time. But I hope that especially those three, like top mid and AD carry, stay together. And like Danny coming into the series, I don't know, you probably did not know him that well, but again, player who was playing here for quite a lot, quite a bit of time, and I was never too high on him, even though he played in some good teams. I was always thinking that he's kind of average or a little bit above average, but this split, I think he's up there with like Peyok, and even in the EU Masters, we saw that he can definitely make the run for their money to the best AD carries up there. So I want to see him develop even further and show us that he does deserve this, and just praises for him.
Yep. I think overall he was really good to split right. I think that when you have three very young players on your two very young players at least in a super right, you have Welcome, you have Saito right. I think that just them being in this EU Masters, like getting that experience playing against those great, like that great of players, right, is going to be a huge boost for them because it probably gives them some sort of direction, right? Like they should be watching through the watch. They should have a coach going through the watch with them and saying, okay, this is where this is where you're doing wrong. This is how you can improve on it. Because at the end of the day, scrims can give you a lot, right? You can learn a lot in scrims to play as a team. But I feel like the places where you improve the most are either when you're getting outclassed in an official game or when you're like sitting down and analyzing your own gameplay. So I feel like if they do a conscious effort towards actually learning towards these new masters, I think both of them are going to be really insane going into next split.
Yeah, and I think that actually our metaphor from before about learning a language is very good in this sense as well, because you can know some of the basics, but you still have to talk to the actual native speaker, or in this sense, play against the good players to just get the rounds in and actually be able to show it on stage. So yeah, that's definitely good.
I think that comes from a lot though, right? Like I think if you even a top ERL player, if they go into LEC, there's like quite a big learning curve because everything changes pace really fast. Like LEC practice is a lot faster. It's a lot more focused on like individual macro things that whereas ERL practice is a lot more how do we make the team work together, right? You don't really have to worry about that much about it in LEC because the team is signed together for 1 year. So you're a lot more like focused on actually like how does the team like function as a unit. And same goes for like when you're playing against better players, right? Is that sometimes you just realize, oh my god, he's doing like this one thing, and you add another piece like to your puzzle. And once you complete the puzzle, you come out as a complete player, right? So I think that's the more experience these players can get, and the more they can actually learn from those experiences, the better they'll be. I think Sayato's always like already a very promising rookie if he continues to play how he's played right now. He seems very flexible. Like his playstyle, I think what I basically rate highly as mid laner, right, is that you have a guy who can play aggressive on picks when he's picked aggressively, but also when that he can basically say, okay, I don't have the best matchup this game, but I'll at least like go even or like just fall slightly behind. You just have like solid rock mid, and I think that what Sayato was for Super, right? And same with Welcome for top lane. Like Welcome was one of the harder matchups for Rifty, despite Rifty having had so much opportunity. Like Rifty was offered an LEC spot back in like 2016, I think it was. So it's like yeah, there's promise in these guys, and I think that's why like as long as they learn from this split, I think like Isuba will have some really good pieces going forward for next split.
I mean, I think they were not outmatched individually as much as like team-wise, as you were saying. I think I was also kind of putting down a bit sacrifice, but I think again maybe some of his mistakes were shown much more because the enemy team knew how to play around jungle and help their jungle much more than maybe Sayator can, even though he's individually a really good player, maybe not does not know this aspect of the game yet, because that is something that is quite hard to learn and comes more with experience, I would say. So yeah, I liked a lot what Isuba showed. Again, I hope not only the players, but I hope the coaching staff stays as well, that the team does not fall apart. And I would like to see them next year for another at least one more EU Masters run, because I think they could if they get decent group, or even again hard group,
Just a
just
playable group.
yeah, just some
Yeah.
playable group that they could show that they can make it to the main event. And we will also as again see what the changes are, because it's not only the pooling, but also they are making some like divisions and stuff like that. So we will see how next year will be looking in these EU Masters and overall the ERLs. I think we can finish up the episode here. I'm quite happy with we talked about everything pretty much. A really good guest today. I think you talked quite well and quite informatively, so I liked it a lot. I enjoyed the episode. Quite stressful for me. I was maybe mumbling a bit sometimes, but I think all good. And here you have a window to, if we did not talk about something you want to talk about, or just give some shout outs maybe to org, some sponsors, whatever you can do. You have a space here now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on the show. It was really nice. I think I probably ended up mumbling a bit as well, but that happens when I speak as fast as I do. So that was probably a bit hard to keep up with as well. I think first of all, I just want to thank like all of the players on the knee right. I think it was great. Thank you guys for being there with me for this split, and hopefully they get picked up by some better teams, or even I might pick them up again. Right, I reuse them a bit again, like I've done in the past. But I think overall, like I just want to shout out Dynamo Eclot as well. Like it was really nice being there. There was some issues here and there, but overall, like it was a nice org to be in, and hopefully they can show more promise in the split, right? Who else do I want to shout out? Oh yeah, I can shout out my agent CJ. Always a lovely lad. He's a bit of a IRL enjoyer right now, but at least he gets stuff done right. So yeah. But thank you for having me on board. It was really enjoyable, and yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, Mark, you can also have final words, and I will close it out then.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Trap, for being here with us and having the first English episode. I enjoyed it a lot, and also thanks to the audience for listening. And yeah, that's it. I don't usually shout out much.
Yeah, and again, thank for again watching. Thank Trap, because I do think that you are talking quite well. So thank you for that, and thank the audience. Like, subscribe, follow Trap, us, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, Instagram. I don't know what all you use. I use only like Twitter and Facebook.
Same. I am an old man in that regard.
Yes, me too. Agreed.
Certainly.
Butches are old.
Exactly.
So, yeah, thanks for watching, and bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.